will be divesting the New York Common Retirement Fund from fossil fuels and fully decarbonizing the fund by 2040. My name is Jordan Dale, and I am Vice President of 350 New Jersey Rockland and one of the leaders of Divest New York and Divest New Jersey. It is an honor to be here today as facilitator of the media conference about this huge announcement that will profoundly benefit both pensioners and the planet. Today's program starts with our virtual media conference. You will hear from 9 brief speakers, followed by a journalist Q&A. Journalists, please make sure your Zoom name includes your media outlet. This will be needed for you to be recognized during the Q&A. We will be using the raise your hand feature so you can ask questions live. We'll share the details when we get to that part of the program. The chat is disabled for this event, but members of the public can ask questions in the Q&A at any time, and our hosts will try to answer as many as possible. After the media conference, we will continue with a rally and celebration featuring additional speakers and an open mic at the end. Speakers will include legislators, activists, and more. The entire event is being recorded. So, why are we here? To recap briefly, the comptroller has announced that his office will be undertaking a review of the New York Common Retirement Fund's fossil fuel holdings and divesting from those that pose a risk to the fund. This review will take place over 4 years. In addition, the comptroller will seek to fully decarbonize the fund by 2040. Both of these initiatives will be subject to interim public steps that will be fully transparent, and both will be done in a manner that fulfills the comptroller's fiduciary duty to maximize returns for the benefit of pensioners. The comptroller's plan is the most ambitious climate action that any pension fund of its size has ever taken, and we at Divest New York want to applaud him for his outstanding climate leadership. Today, we will hear from a powerful group of speakers commenting on the comptroller's divestment and decarbonization announcement. The first speaker is Hridesh Singh. Hridesh is a climate activist and serves as the executive director of New York Youth Climate Leaders, a policy-driven organization of youth from across the state advocating for environmental and economic justice. New York Youth Climate Leaders was instrumental in getting us to this moment. A native of Rochester, New York, Hridesh is currently a freshman at Williams College. Hridesh.
Well, thank you so much, Jordan, for that really kind intro. And thank you all for joining us today and the rest of the Divest New York Coalition. Somewhat speechless, honestly, right now, after 8 years of campaigning that Divest New York has gone through, that to be at this moment where now the New York State Common Retirement Fund is the largest pension fund in the world and in the history of the fossil fuel divestment movement to make this sort of climate commitment just speaks volumes to the work, organizing, and activism that the Divest New York Coalition has done for nearly a decade now. So that is a testament that people power works, that with enough mobilization, enough organizing, and enough campaigning, that we truly can do anything and truly create a more equitable and better future for us all. With this announcement, obviously, New York State is joining New York City, along with over 1,200 institutions across the world who've also made divestment commitments. And with New York State joining these other groups, it becomes one of the largest pension funds, again, in the world to make such a commitment. As a result of this commitment, we really hope to see many more pension funds and other pools of capital across the world making such divestment commitments in order to continue the fight against the ongoing climate crisis. This was a grassroots, people-powered victory. won by a multi-generational, multiracial movement that touched every corner of New York State, from Buffalo to the Bronx, led by the DivestNY Coalition. And this agreement and announcement sends a clear signal to the nation and the rest of the world. Fossil fuels are a thing of the past, and that we must transition into a clean energy economy that works for us all, not just the well-off and well-connected. Obviously, we know that the climate crisis will disproportionately affect my generation and future generations to come. But we know that the climate crisis is already here and right now. The Divest New York movement grew out of Superstorm Sandy that battered New York City in 2012. And the climate crisis continues to impact our state to this very day, disproportionately impacting communities of color and low-income communities across the state. So as we continue to combat this crisis, both locally at the state level, as well as nationally and internationally, we must remember why we are fighting this fight: to ensure a livable and safe future for my generation and future generations to come, and to help uplift those individuals in society who have been marginalized for way too long. So although, as we know, there is much work left to be done in this ongoing fight, today we celebrate this historic people-powered victory, knowing that people power works and that it will work time and time again. Thank you.
Thank you, Hridesh. Senator Liz Krueger was first elected to the New York State Senate in 2002 and is the chair of the Senate Finance Committee. Senator Krueger is a strong advocate for women's rights, affordable housing, access to health care, social services, public education, and good government. As a legislative leader on environmental sustainability, Senator Krueger was central to passing New York State's plastic bag ban, is the lead sponsor of legislation to repeal $1.6 billion in annual state fossil fuel subsidies, and was the lead sponsor of the Fossil Fuel Divestment Act. Senator Krueger.
Good morning, everybody. So it is so exciting to be seeing everyone who has worked so hard on this issue for so many years with big smiles on their faces because we've won. And I just want to emphasize how important it is what Tom DiNapoli announced today. And that is because the work all of us were doing for years. So I'm very proud to have been the lead sponsor with Felix Ortiz, my friend from the Assembly, on the legislative Fossil Fuel Divestment Act. But I want to highlight that what Tom DiNapoli is proposing today is actually stronger than the act would have been if we did finally get it passed. And we were really close. But I said from day one, if Tom DiNapoli wants to voluntarily divest and get us where we need to go, I will stand with him proudly, which is exactly what I am doing today and what I think you, the activists in the state of New York and the region, are doing today. Why is what we're accomplishing today so important, even stronger than our Divestment Act? It's because it will have the New York State Pension Fund acting within a shorter period of time, 4 years from this announcement, and it would have taken 5 or more years if we had gotten the Fossil Fuel Divestment Act passed. The controller has committed that through careful assessment and action on the overall fossil fuel sector, all fossil fuel companies versus just producers, he will be evaluating removing them from the pension fund. It goes further than my act did to cover all the fund's carbon-heavy polluting industries like utilities, transportation, and the construction industries, not just pulling fossil fuels out of the ground. And it has a very rigorous reporting and public transparency commitment to achieve fund-wide decarbonization by 2040 with specific tangible metrics we're going to be able to look at and track over that time. And of course, we will have controllers come and go over that time, and we will be able to hold them accountable to the commitment of this controller today. So I think this is the biggest thing in divestment internationally we have seen to date, and I have no question that other states and localities throughout our country will be looking at this change and saying, why can't we get there? We can't let New York be the only one who does this. So I think this is the beginning of a movement that will sweep through the country. So thank you all for your hard work.
And thank you, Senator Krueger, for your exceptional leadership on this issue. So I want to take a second to urge everyone on the call to help amplify today's announcement by the comptroller through social media. Even now, during the call, we're going to post a link to the social media toolkit, and please spread this great news far and wide. Our next speaker is Mimi Hoffman. Mimi has been a social worker in the public and not-for-profit sectors for close to 50 years. She is a pension recipient of the Common Retirement Fund based on her employment at Middletown State Hospital, Rockland Department of Probation, Rockland County Jail, and Rockland Community College. She has long been an activist for civil rights, women's rights, and climate action and justice. In 2019, she was inducted into the Rockland Women Leaders Hall of Fame for her pioneering work on domestic violence. Mimi. Mimi, are you there? Are you on mute?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much, Jordan. What an honor to represent pensioners at this historic and joyous event. It was only a few years ago that I started receiving a pension from the Common Retirement Fund. Shortly after I became a climate activist and began divesting my own stock portfolio, I was shocked to learn the Common Retirement Fund held a huge fossil fuel position, and I was psyched to join Divest New York's effort to change that up. Well, here we are. It took a village. I might add, a very outstanding village. Everyone played an important role. There are many memories to treasure, and today we can celebrate a big win beyond the parameters of the Fossil Fuel Divestment Act. The fund will become more sustainable and build its capacity to address the impact of climate change on its investments. I am truly excited to get my next pension check. I'm not sure how I will memorialize it, but I know it will have added value for me each month as a symbol of New York's commitment to clean energy, its growing respect for activist energy, and its willingness to navigate innovative paths to address climate change.
Mimi, thank you for speaking for all pensioners in noting how important this change is going to be for them and for you. Our next speaker is Tom Sanzillo. Tom is the Director of Financial Analysis at the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, affectionately known as IEFA. He has 30 years of experience in public and private finance, including as first Deputy Comptroller of New York State, where he oversaw a $156 billion pension fund and a $200 billion in municipal bond programs. Take it away, Tom.
Oh, thanks. Thank all of you for all of the hard work, and I'm particularly honored by the fact that all of the grassroots organizations in the state who have asked us to help have been just a big boost to us and how we work, and I'm honored to have served with all of you in moving forward here. You know, I've worked a long time with institutional investors, and to the outside world, they move slowly. The climate issue is particularly problem for them because the use of fossil fuels is so wide and deep in the economy, And historically, it's been a very big contributor to pension funds. But what Comptroller DiNapoli has found after a lengthy dialogue with the fossil fuel industry is that they are weak financially, that the outlook for them financially is also pretty weak. And he learned that the fossil fuel companies have stopped listening. Comptroller DiNapoli, however, he didn't stop listening. He's been listening to the companies, as he should. He's listening to his colleagues in the institutional investment world, to scientists, to citizens concerned with climate, to his staff. And then as the sole trustee of the pension fund, he's had to make an all things considered judgment to rid the portfolio of fossil fuels. And that's a big step for him and for the institutional investment community. He's widely regarded in the institutional investment community world because he has respect for the fiduciary duty that he's been charged with. A few years back, 60% of Exxon's shareholders voted for his resolution on climate change. That is an extraordinary compliment to him. It is extraordinary recognition of leadership, and he is on display here again. His plan to divest from fossil fuels shows that he's still listening, and he's still listening to the companies and other shareholders and scientists, as Senator Krueger just pointed out. And he, as the leader of the institutional investors on climate change, is likely with this action to have most of them who are at all thinking take a second look, because many of them have been reluctant to divest. We rarely see this kind of leadership. We rarely see this kind of leadership from Senator Krueger, not from her, but in the public realm, we rarely see the type of leadership we're seeing here in Senator Krueger and Governor Cuomo also have all pitched in here. And with all the issues facing us as a nation, it's important to stop for a moment when we do see high quality leadership. And rarely have we seen the kind of tenacity at the grassroots level in New York State than we have on this particular initiative. And I'm confident that other institutional investors will follow his lead and the lead of the New York movement that made it happen. Thanks.
I can say on behalf of the activist community, thank you for your tremendous leadership in this effort and for providing the data that helped to drive it. Our next speaker is Professor Farhana Sultana. Dr. Sultana is an associate professor and research director from the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University. She is an internationally recognized interdisciplinary scholar. Her areas of study include climate justice, water governance, sustainability, international development, citizenship, and human rights. She is one of the original signatories of the letter calling for divestment, which was also signed by 1,100 academics and researchers from around the world. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Sultana.
Thank you so much, Jordan. And hello and good morning to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm one of the representatives of the 1,100 academics and researchers from the academic community who signed the letter earlier this year calling for the divestment of the New York Common Retirement or Pensions Fund. This is because this is really important as a first step towards climate action that's concrete and to influence climate policy and therefore achieve some semblance of climate justice, not just domestically, but also internationally. This commitment demonstrates that New York can indeed lead by example when it comes to big climate decision-making. The New York Comptroller should thus be congratulated for moving in the right direction away from fossil fuels. This is because fossil fuel divestment is an important component of a just transition towards climate justice. So any commitments to divestment locally or internationally or nationally and followed through with other similar acts will not only help those of us who've been working on this, but then also to New York State as a whole in reducing all of our overall carbon and ecological footprints and our contributions to climate breakdown, because we are all embedded within systems of economics and policymaking and rules and pension funds and so on. So if we think about how we can assist not only communities here in this, but then also communities globally. And this is particularly important for communities of color who have been devastated by the fossil fuel industry's long-standing extraction, pollution, human rights violations, ecosystem destruction, and the cumulative effects of climate breakdown. And this has been occurring unevenly across the world. So it is high time that the US steps up to the plate, and New York is therefore leading the way. So to think about moving to a decarbonized system and for structural change, New York State's commitment on divestment of its pension fund away from fossil fuels thus not only helps New Yorkers, but the global community that New York State has long-standing and significant ties to. This divestment signals New York's commitment to climate justice and to equitable and just transitions away from fossil fuels towards generative economies and societies. The next steps to align investments, policies, and practices that foster and promote carbon neutral futures, net zero emissions targets, and just transitions with transparency and accountability are thus excellent news. And given the increasing interest and concern about climate change in the US, and the new administration announcing that climate will be a central issue for President-elect Biden, moving away from fossil fuels is the right thing to do. New York should thus continue to lead by example on climate and encourage all the other states in the US and the entire country to follow suit, because the US's overall contribution to climate change needs to be tackled systemically and rigorously. We owe this to our current and future generations, here and elsewhere. Thus, this announcement from the comptroller and all the coordinated long-standing work by grassroots activists, students, academics, civic bodies, and various government workers and average citizens that went into making this happen is an important moment. We should celebrate this moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sultana. It's an honor to introduce our next speaker, Bill McKibben. Bill is an author and co-founder of 350.org and is the Schumann Distinguished Professor in Residence at Middlebury College in Vermont. He was a 2014 recipient of the Right Livelihood Prize, sometimes called the Alternative Nobel, and the Gandhi Peace Award. Bill, take it away.
Well, thank you. What a great day from the top of Mount Marcy in the middle of the greatest wilderness in the eastern US to the top of the Empire State Building in the most global diverse city on planet Earth. There should be just cheers and huzzas ringing out across New York today. This is really, really huge news. You know, I've gotten to be a part of this divestment battle from its beginning in 2012. There have been some signal moments along the way when the Rockefeller family divested, when the Republic of Ireland divested all its accounts, when New York City divested a couple of years ago, when Oxford and Cambridge. This is one of the really great important moments. This is the biggest pension fund to divest yet. It comes from the state that is at the heart of the global financial system. That is, it is smart money. And it comes after the long effort of the comptroller to engage with these oil companies and try to knock some sense into them. His understanding, that was, in a rational world, that was the right thing to do. You would think that would be all one would have to do, is sit down with them and explain where the future lay. But as he finally concluded that doesn't work in a system as irrational and broken as ours has become, and it takes dramatic action like this to lead us into the future. So far this year, Pope Francis has come out for divestment, the Queen of England has come out for divestment, and now the Comptroller of the State of New York. And I'm not in a position to judge which of those is the single most far-reaching and far-seeing. I am in a position to say that this will have enormous effect around the planet. This is important news in New York, where people's pensions are now better protected than they were yesterday. But it's truly huge news around the world, where this fight against the malign power of the fossil fuel industry may be the most important fight that the people have ever undertaken on this earth. It comes in what will probably be the hottest year we've ever recorded on this planet, in a year where we've seen epic fire and flood, and it comes just in time to spur the next round of resistance. I think that what this demonstrates above all is the waning power of the fossil fuel industry to control events. They are being outpaced by clean energy, and they are being stood up against by a huge and growing movement with increasing sophistication that brings the financial tools that people like Tom Sanzillo have mastered, that bring the legislative tools that people like Liz Krueger bring to bear, and that above all bring the activism that so many people across New York State for so long have brought to bear. This has been a grinding, hard fight that's gone on after setback and disappointment, year after year after year, and nobody has given up, not once. Look, were it not for the pandemic, we would be assembling in Albany today for one hell of a party. And it would be a great pleasure to raise a bottle of good New York State beer with everybody here except Hridesh, who I guess we'd have to give a Coca-Cola to. But it has been a staggering victory, and it is just impossible to say both how much it matters globally and how much thanks are due the people who have never let up, not for a minute, in this 8-year battle.
Thank you so much, Bill. I just want to say that your Do the Math video is what inspired me to become a climate activist. So, okay. Mark Dunlea is the chair of the Green Education and Legal Fund and legislative coordinator of PAWS, which is People of Albany United for Safe Energy. This is the 350.org affiliate in Albany. Mark was a member of the 350 NYC steering committee when it initiated the campaigns to divest the NYC and New York State pension funds from fossil fuels. A graduate of Albany Law School, he was the 2018 Green Party candidate for state comptroller, running on the divestment issue.
Thank you, Jordan. It is certainly such an honor to follow up with Bill McKibben, who really initiated the international campaign for divestment. He seems to like beer. I remember Bill, when we got Ireland divest, called me up and asked me if I would bring a 12-pack of Guinness beer over to Tom DiNapoli to encourage him. His security people would not take the beer, said we can't take gifts. I tried to make the point, it wasn't a gift, it was a study aid. But as Jordan pointed out, I was there back in 2012 when Bill did his Do the Math tour. His article in Rolling Stone made the point that if we were to survive climate change, we need to keep 80% of the fossil fuels in the ground. And the divestment campaign, we got like 190 different campaigns about 3 weeks after we first launched it, or 350.org launched it, was a conscious effort to try to duplicate the divestment movement and its impact on apartheid in South Africa. I want to thank a lot of people who were here. This really was a relay race. I can't do it in 3 minutes. I did tape something that's on my Facebook page. I certainly want to recognize the role of 350 NYC, who started the campaign not only in New York State, but in New York City, 2 successful campaigns. Lena Hinkle, the late D.A. Hearn. Very, very early on, John Ingram joined us. Dorian Fulvivo did a lot of the bird dogging of the controller. Clara Vondrich was a member of New York City, and then later became a national figure in the divestment campaign. And I always remember one of our first big rallies in New York City at Tom DiNapoli's office in New York City. We were joined by sort of the outgrowth of the Occupy Wall Street movement. And it was sort of interesting to see at the end of the campaign that the New York Youth for Climate Leaders came in with that type of energy, but also last, I believe, February, Extinction Rebellion did an occupation. 11 of us, 12 of us got arrested at Tom DiNapoli's office. Steve Knight was there at the beginning, brought in Green Faith, certainly the New York State Councils of Churches and Interfaith Impact. Unions are very critical in New York City. Particularly want to thank John Foster, who was a vice president of DC 37. New York State Nurses was probably the first union who joined us at a press conference. Doug Bullock got both the Troy Area Labor Council and the Albany Central Labor Council to give us a big resolution in favor. The Sustainability Business Council, the New York elected officials. I really want to thank both Ruth Foster and Jordan Dale. They really picked up the campaign and helped coordinate it over the years. When I first went to the legislature to ask him to introduce the bill, Felix Ortiz, who I'd known for 35 years from my hunger work, was the first person to come on board. Shortly after that, we got Senator Krueger, but I also want to thank their staff. Justin Flagg was there the entire time. More of a relay race with Felix, but Krista William and Camille O'Brien. Brett Fleischman did a lot of the financial analysis early on from 350. Tom Sanzillo was great, but Brett sort of started us off. 350.org, want to obviously thank Richard Brooks. I'm going to just follow up with Tom DiNapoli. We always said that Tom was strong on climate, but we needed him to take that next step. I thought if we could get 50 legislators to sponsor the bill, it took 100. We hope this is really a transformative moment and that Tom now moves forward and really becomes not only a national, but an international leader in the effort to break free from fossil fuels. Thank you.
Mark, thank you. If anybody deserves recognition for this campaign, it's you, who've been with it from the very, very start and were a stalwart. And your list of thank yous just underscores Mimi's comment that it takes a village, and we had a very strong village. The penultimate speaker today is Felix Ortiz. Felix Ortiz is the assistant speaker in the New York State Assembly. He has represented Brooklyn's 51st Assembly District since 1996. Born in La Playa de Salinas, Puerto Rico, he developed a love and respect for the environment in his youth. He uses his platform as a legislator to promote environmental conservation and preservation. He introduced the plastic bag ban in 1998, and he is a leader in the National Conference of Environmental Legislators and a council member of elected officials to protect America. Assistant Speaker Ortiz was the lead sponsor and biggest champion of the Fossil Fuel Divestment Act in the New York State Assembly. Take it away, Felix. Are you on mute?
Now, can you hear me now?
Your sound is not good. So, Assistant Speaker, we're having technical difficulties reaching you. I'm going to pass over you and come back to you. Hopefully, we'll be able to sort out your connection. I'm just going to pivot and turn to our next speaker, who is Patrick Houston. Patrick Houston is an organizer with New York Communities for Change. There, he has led New York Communities for Change members and allies in the fights to stop the Williams Pipeline and pass New York City's Local Law 97 Buildings Bill. Patrick, if you would, you'll go next. And after that, we'll go back to Felix Ortiz.
Hey everyone, how's it going? So great to be here. This is such a, the significance of today's announcement cannot be overstated. For me, it brings me back to when I realized just how we must do everything in our power to stop fueling the climate crisis. About 8 years ago, my AmeriCorps team was called on to assist with Hurricane Sandy response. And so we were deployed to the region. And the terrible impact remains fresh in my mind. Sailboats awkwardly lay on the asphalt, blocks inland. Houses were torn beyond recognition. You could see the backyards visible from the front yard after floodwaters just tore through the first floors. Families were violently displaced and in serious trouble. Shell-shocked and distraught. They needed shelter, they needed meals, they needed the disaster assistance through FEMA. And then we know low-income communities of color, especially, or including many New York Communities for Change members, they got the worst of it. And meanwhile, while all this was happening, oil and gas executives were financing the fracking boom. And this past hurricane season was the most active in history. We saw about 30 named storms. But today we're getting real action to fight this accelerating crisis. Comptroller DiNapoli is launching the best program of any major public fund worldwide to combat climate change and safeguard retirees' long-term interests. From review and divestment by industry subsector to voting out the directors of corporations who fail to take climate action, this plan is going to move global finance. It's going to help close down fossil fuels and move non-fossil fuel corporations such as car companies, tech, and utilities to also slash their pollution. This is going to change the world for the better. Comptroller DiNapoli, listen to experts, listen to activists, and listen to state legislators. And today, history is being made. So thank you all. Thank you, Divest New York. Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Thank you, Senator Krueger, and every legislator, organization, activist, and public official who joined this fight and fed into this phenomenal victory.
And thank you, Patrick, for your tremendous work as a climate activist. All right, let's give it another try. Assistant Assembly Speaker, Felix Ortiz. Assistant Speaker, are you ready?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No? Yes?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm ready. Okay, so let me just, first of all, thank you to all the organizers. And let me just point out that Mark Dolan, who has my phone number and my cell phone number, now he can put it to rest, unless he needs me in the future. But Mark, I owe you so much for walking to my office and say to me, do you want to carry this bill? And I said, well, let me read the bill, let me check the bill. And I said, bingo, this is something that I will do. No question in my mind. I just pointed out, I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, in La Playa de Salinas, where, hurricanes for us is something of the norm, something that we live with it in every single season that passed by throughout the year. So when I came to New York, I got elected, I saw Sandy situation happen, and I began to really get more close to what are the things that we can do to tackle resiliency, to tackle environmental climate change in our state. Well, fossil fuel being one of the most critical one, as we all know, COVID-19, when you look into the stock market and you begin to see what is happening with the fossil fuel investments, they all been going out the drain. So this is the best opportunity that we have to really demonstrate to the investors and the investments that is out there on fossil fuel that in reality it is not a need to continue to invest on fossil fuel. Furthermore, I would like to thank my friend, Controller Tom DiNapoli, because he has managed not just to listen, but to execute and to take us to the next level. And the next level is that now in the next 4 years, we hope and we will see how we're going to phasing out from fossil fuel. Lastly, I would like to thank all the organizers. I would like to thank my counterpart, Liz Krueger, and I cannot thank so much my dear friend Steve Undergrad, because Steve has been one of the biggest champions on climate change and environmental, and being my chair of the Environmental Committee, the Assembly. He has demonstrated his commitment to this particular bill as well. And lastly, I know that I'm departing from the Assembly, but let me just tell you this. I might be gone, but my heart is still there. I love that institution. I love what I have done. I love what I have managed to accomplish. And I think today is one of the biggest days that we not only can celebrate, but we can all now go back home and say we have managed to move forward to protect not only the minority community that I represent, but to protect the people of the state of New York and the people of this country, and send a message to Washington that the impossible can be possible if we build consensus. So thank you to you all.
Thank you, Assistant Speaker, for your leadership, and what a tremendous addition to your legacy of service today's achievement is. Okay, so it is now time for Q&A.
Wait, did you want me to say something, Jordan, or for the council churches?
Yes, but it's later on in the